Welcome everyone to the Flux Dev Meeting, EU edition, EU and UK edition, I have to say now. So having a look at the agenda that's in here. Can someone volunteer to take notes, please?
Yeah, I'll take notes for today.
Oh, thanks, Paolo. The thing actually, someone's got ahead of us and copied in an entry for January 27th. So just to make sure, if you're looking at these, that you're in the January 19th part of the document. And put Paolo in here. Cool. And if you can edit the doc, then maybe put yourself in as an attendee. Okay.
Sorry, I just realized that I don't have edit access, so I can't really take notes.
Yeah, that does make it tricky. Can someone, I'm not sure how you
I can help with that.
Edit access. Brilliant. Thank you. Cool. All right. So we have a few standing agenda. First one is things that are happening that are to do with GA, general availability. So I can report on one thing, which is that I think it's generally felt that having cross namespace references in the image automation is, if not a requirement for GA, then a good thing to have. So I created an issue for that, and Sanskar, who is not here, but he volunteered to work on that. Has anyone else got anything to report about progress towards GA?
Well, for me, it's more of a question, really. So the issue that we're experiencing around that you reported recently, actually, that you actually collected from a few users, is that a blocker for GA at all?
Which issue was it? Sorry, Paolo.
Is with libgit2, and I think
yeah.
Image update, I think.
Yeah, so there's two, if I'm thinking of the right one, there's kind of two related issues. One is that anyone using libgit2, or rather anyone using libgit2 with either source controller or image automation ends up seeing a lot of errors logged for socket timeout with SSL, or SSH rather. And then the related one is in image automation controller specifically. Haven't seen it reported for source controller. That quite often also results in the controller stopping doing anything, including logging. So it just logs that and then doesn't seem to do anything. So almost like the process is just blocked. So your question is, does that block GA? I guess it's a question of the severity. I mean, there are always going to be bugs. This is kind of a nasty one. Well, an annoying one. It's not nasty in that it doesn't really harm things, but it is pretty annoying.
But overall, it's not a large quantity of users that are being affected by this, right? This is still quite minimal.
Well, it's difficult to tell. I think quite a few people have reported the SSH socket timeout error. And if you sort of take the proportion of people that report things, or add their +1 to issues versus the proportion of people that sort of silently suffer, I think actually there could be quite a few people seeing that. And there's I can actually tell you the number of people who are having a stall problem. That's fewer people, but still some. So I think 1, 2, 3 or 4, I think 4 people out of more than I've got listed here, but sort of roughly half the people, maybe a bit less than half the people.
Just a quick
report
question
also
there.
the controller stalling.
Hey, Michael.
Yep.
Is this specific to some Git provider, or is this just like a libgit2 generic issue?
Yes, I think it's libgit2. It is almost always with the SSH could not read data error waiting on socket thing.
Yeah, but are they using it for?
Specific.
Are they using it against like GitHub, or is it Azure DevOps, or?
Oh, I see. No, it is. There are reports against Azure DevOps, GitHub, GitLab. I think I saw self-hosted GitLab and Bitbucket. So yeah, it's not specific to any Git.
I guess that's like a generic libgit2 issue then in that case.
Seems to be, yeah. Yeah, there's also a report of someone else reported the controller stalling when they had a different issue using GitHub. I think it was something like they had some sort of network problem and connections to GitHub timed out. And then they reported that they were seeing log messages with errors for both source controller and image automation, and their image automation controller had to be restarted. So that's a sort of a variation that is not the same error, but the same symptom.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
But it seems the most common error is the SSH could not read data, and that's libgit2 specific, but not specific to a Git provider.
It may be that we are linking against buggy libssh2. If you look at the last reports, people have started seeing that unrecovered timeout after 0.15 release. And the 0.15 release, what that did was updating OpenSSH and libgit and libssh2. We changed the linker, how it behaves. So
Okay.
it may not be a libgit2 issue. It may be an issue that comes from libssh because libgit2 does not implement SSH at all.
Yeah,
Sure, yes. Yeah.
One thing that is good to remember as well, that before we were using dependencies from seed, and we were not really forcing all the dependencies to be the recommended versions, which might mean that, you know, there was instabilities that we didn't pick up as well. So the latest version should definitely fix some of that for sure.
Yeah, we have to roll out Bookworm, do a release, include that in 0.26, and ask all those people to upgrade and see if that happens and what happens. I'm guessing it could happen, but maybe not. So yeah, it's on. I added this to the Flux 0.26 release planning.
Stefan, you said that it's now built a different way. Is that in a release yet?
No, it's not even in the repo because we cannot, because image automation controller depends on the whole source controller. We can we need to release source controller with bookworm and the static build. Then we can do these changes in image automation controller, release that, and finally release Flux, the new version. It's all tracked in the issue I created this morning.
Okay, so the things that you think might fix this particular problem haven't been released yet. That's just to be really clear, because people have reported this up to 0.19 of the image automation controller. So I just wanted to make sure that
Yeah, so from
0.19 didn't already have the thing you thought might fix it.
No. So yeah,
Okay.
starting with 0.16, we've changed to the seed version, unstable version of libssh2, and that's where some people have reported, hey, after I upgrade this particular version, the SSH timeout started to happen. And the plan is, I don't know, this week or maybe early next week, we finalize the 0.26 release preparation, we release it, and then we have to go back to all those issues and ask people, hey, can you try out this version and see if anything changes. We can also do a release candidate, so it will not block on the 0.26 release.
That's worth doing. There's
so
plenty of people
can,
who have volunteered to try stuff out. So
yeah, I can do a release candidate out of the pull request that will have all this static building and everything else inside.
cool. I'm just looking at. There is a very early report of this, but the only one that I've noted down as being 0.14 or earlier was the problem that wasn't actually SSH. It was failing to connect to github.com.
Yeah.
So it is possible that it is something that arrived with 0.15, as far as I can tell from my notes.
We had issues for the OpenSSL linker, and it failed in some environments cloning over HTTPS. In order to solve that, we changed how we build and how we link it. We bumped the versions. We are linking to a new OpenSSL version and a new libssh2 version. We fixed the HTTPS thing, but we've ended up with SSH being problematic. So it's
right. Computer. To summarize, computers. Okay. All right. So that might get fixed. The controller stalling is another area of concern. Maybe some other things could cause that, which should be bad. But also, I have no idea why it would do that. So I'm completely guessing why that happens. Maybe it's stuck, deadlocked in one of the C libraries or something. And that's about as far as I've got with guessing.
Yeah, we should strive to get rid of the mix of libraries in image automation controller and only use libgit2. It is possible because we mix the two libraries that libgit2 doesn't understand what GoGit does. It forgets some lock there. The whole disk gets filled over time. And that's where it gets stuck because, well, there is no more space and the controller cannot, it will lock down on IO weight.
Yeah, I've more or less dismissed that theory. Certainly people reported the disk filling up. That is a problem, but I don't think that's what causes the controller to stall, because none of the people that reported the controller stalling also reported running out of disk or anything like that, or the memory ballooning. So I think they're unrelated. It's just kind of on the surface, it seems unlikely that using the two different libraries causes a problem. But having said that, who knows? The reason I think it's unlikely is that they're just dealing with files. So it's like using using Git, the command line tool, and a library. Say they shouldn't really, unless there are bugs in the libraries, which no doubt there are. Yes. Why would there be bugs in the libraries?
But quick question on that, like is our health check, can we extend the health check to actually be able to assess that it's completely operational? So at least it would kind of reset the controller instance. So it would, continue to work. The bug wouldn't be fixed, but it will, be working fine for deployments while we try to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer is that it's difficult because for all the normal sorts of distributed computing reasons, right? It is difficult to tell whether something's failed or is just taking a long time. So in general, you don't know, for instance, that the operation is not going to succeed at some point and everything's actually fine. It's just taking a while. And in particular, if the process that is trying to do the thing is stalled, blocked, then you can't ask it. So you sort of have to ask something else or have some heuristic like, if I've not done anything for 5 minutes, then let's consider this controller not live. But then maybe there wasn't anything to do for 5 minutes. So
maybe the interval
tricky.
was set to 1 day or whatever. Maybe
Right,
that's what
exactly.
the user wants.
Right, precisely. And it is worse to have a false positive for your liveness check. Or sorry, false negative, I guess it would be, as in it's worse to wrongly conclude that the controller is dead than it is to the other way around, to not notice that it's dead. Because it'll just get restarted all the time and nothing will happen.
There are solutions to that idea though, right? Like a watchdog, you could put Alert Manager has a similar idea where there is something happening every period in a single thread. And
right,
if
but then you're just
fails to
testing
happen,
that thread's running.
Yeah.
That's what we have now. I mean, that's what there is now, right? There's an HTTP server, it gets pinged, but all that's checking is that HTTP server is still running. It's not checking that the controller is doing anything other than continuing to serve HTTP.
Yeah, what we are actually checking there is that the Go routine pool is not started. So every time Kubernetes does a call to our controller, the controller spins up a new Go routine to answer to the health check and liveness check. So we know for sure, because those are working, that is not a starvation of the Go routine thread pool. There are enough threads there, a Go routine can be spin and can be closed. So the stalling is really at a higher level than just, I don't have Go routines. Or I don't have network sockets available or stuff like that. I'm still thinking something has to do with the disk, but I propose the next step after we do the static building, if this continues, to focus on rewriting the image automation controller operations only with libgit2 and eliminate that major difference between source controller and image automation controller. So people can set both to libgit2, and then we can better figure out why one is not stalling, why one is able to clone and the other one is not, because they should definitely be using the same code and the same
Yeah, it's only that it's the cloning code that fails, right? So that is the same code that's using the source controller. It's not, and that fails cloning. So it hasn't even got to the stage of using GoGit yet, the other library. So it is unlikely to be something that is a problem with anything that happens after cloning, because by that time, those things are gone. But sorry, what I mean is, by the time it's cloning something, any other clones have gone again. It's not dealing with those. So I think that would, I push that down the list of things to rewrite or look at.
Okay.
Anyway, so the question was originally, should that be considered an issue for holding back GA? I mean, my guess is, yeah, I would count both of those things as, I mean, they're not disastrous, but they're pretty annoying, and maybe there are bigger problems that they indicate. So just in sort of terms of severity, I would judge it's worth trying to fix them before GA. But that's, I think it's an opinion. I don't think there's anything, there's no criteria that say, yes, it is exactly, or no, it's not exactly.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, and then anything else? Can anyone report on the rewrite of package runtime and the progress on that?
Sunny?
Package runtime, right? What do you mean?
Sorry,
Or
say that
source
again.
controller. You also have package runtime rewrite?
Yeah.
Or
so
do you mean source controller?
No, I mean, well, I mean, the thing that kicked it off was Hida rewrote stuff in package runtime, and I think one of the other common libraries to deal with conditions and so on uniformly, and then that has implications for all of the other things. And perhaps the source controller thing is something that's blocking that proceeding. Is that right?
So recently we updated all the source controller reconsiders their branches to use Go 117 and all the new things that's in the main branch. And it is almost finishing the ham chart reconsider. That's the last part. And I think we are targeting RC release by the end of the week.
Okay, that sounds good.
That's how they. And I have still been working on the third document for the controller patterns. Couldn't finish it because I was sick the past few days. So that document will be available soon, which will have all the details about the new controller patterns.
Right. So that is a document about the
changes, the rewrite.
Right, exactly. The consistent model for how conditions are dealt with and all that sort of.
Not just conditions, but overall, like how you handle events and logging, standardized logging related things.
Batching, yeah. Cool. Okay. Thank you. Let's not mute me. So the next standing thing is the security audit backlog. Paolo, I think you probably know the most about that, having sort of looked at it a lot and dealt with a lot of those bugs.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So in terms of documentation, there's quite a few things that are still kind of ongoing. Most of them are already assigned to people. So I would assume the next week they should be mostly done. In terms of the fuzzing PRs, we have 5 that were merged in the last week or so. There are 2 outstanding. I'm working on the image, actually on the search controller fuzzing right now. So that's that for fuzzing. I'm hoping to get both, the last 2 fuzzing PRs done between this week. Well, actually, yeah, pretty much this week. Another point is around kind of safer security defaults. So there's about 6 PRs that we need to create. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah. Back now. So 3 PRs are already created. Sunscar is working on the last 3. So that should get us to the end of this week, having that all finished. And to be honest, I think that is it really. Like once we finish those 2 things, so the fuzzing and the security defaults, we should be good from a coding perspective. And on top of that, it's just documentation that is on the works as well.
Yeah, we have to document the new security defaults and let people know, hey, from this moment on, Flux does no longer work on OpenShift. It no longer works if you set some user ID in your pod security policies. It will no longer work, or any Kubernetes versions start older than 120. Yeah, we have to let people know there are a bunch of breaking changes in the new release.
So wait a second, we're dropping support for 119?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, when I've announced that at the last Flux release. So people...
yeah, okay, sorry, that was me just having an off by 1 error. So I was thinking it was dropping support for anything earlier than 119, but it's up to and including 119.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
119 has been...
Those 2 things line up.
Yeah, 119 is end of life since November last year. So, yeah.
Okay. Grand. All right, so let's move on to I've got to scroll down quite a bit further. Scott has put in an item, but he is not here to talk about it, and neither is Manuel. So maybe we'll defer that one to the later meeting next week, which brings me to drop off the end of the agenda. So does anyone have anything they would like to be on the agenda or just to bring up spontaneously?
Libgit to proxy support was merged a few hours ago. So the next release will have proxy support. We found certain situations which works with Git and doesn't work in Libgit too. Those things need to be documented somewhere.
Oh, that's interesting. So they didn't. That's usually via an environment variable, right? So
the libraries don't support certain things.
Okay.
Like Libgit 2 doesn't support HTTP proxy. It works with GoGit. And then
okay.
The version of Libgit 2 we are using doesn't have support for no proxy, but it works with GoGit. So there are certain things we need to document them. I can link the
So there is a table in the API spec. I also commented on that merge pull request. There is a document of the differences between GoGit and Libgit 2. It's a table. And in that table, we should add there a new section around proxying and what works, how it works, and so on. Highlight there the differences. So we cannot close that issue, right?
Or we can create another one for socks. All right, there was an issue associated with it, right? This is just the issue
We have
number
a
131.
131, very, very old issue. Right? Or let's say if there is no way to deal with HTTP, then we should document it and close this issue with the pull request that adds documentation and tell people, hey, this is what we can support. HTTPS for libgit2, HTTP for GoGit, and close it.
Like nobody is asking for HTTP. The examples people shared, they are using HTTPS.
So libgit2 does obey HTTPS proxy.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no one should be using HTTP proxy anyway then. Should they? Yeah, okay.
And that's why I'm saying we can close the issue even if the issue says we want HTTP, and we can close the issue saying we got you HTTPS, that's the best we can do.
Yeah, it's for your own good. Cool. Okay, if there's nothing else, I have a, not really an announcement. I'm just going to spend less time on Flux, at least for a while, because there's other stuff in Weaveworks that I need to pay attention to. So you may not see me as much in these meetings and in GitHub and possibly in Slack. I will try and stick around and finish some things and still be around for governance as long as I'm needed for that.
Would that include RFCs? Can you dedicate some time to the current RFCs?
Yeah, right. So that the process with RFCs is that maintainers have to sign them off, isn't it? So yeah, as long as I remain a maintainer, then I will need to pay attention to those. Yeah. Do you want to? That reminds me. Do you want to talk about the 2 RFCs that are at all, Stefan, that are remaining?
Yes, I want to talk about RFC 002 because yeah, that's next on the list, and the approach I took in November doesn't quite work. If I'm talking about all the RFCs in there, it becomes a mess. So now I'm taking the approach of let's talk about one by one, merge them and so on, because the way they are structured, they are independent. So RFC 002, which deals with access control lists, is about extending what we currently have for image repositories in regards to image policies to everything else in the source controller APIs. That means Helm repositories, Helm charts, and Git repositories. And potentially in the future, if we finalize the OCI repository, it will also apply to that. I have addressed your comments and Hida's comments last week, and I'm looking for new feedback or from Relu, Philip, Sunny, Mark, anyone else that's a maintainer and hadn't added any kind of comment here. If you please, if you have no concerns, or if you don't care about this, but by reading it, it feels okay to you, at least approve it, because we are currently stuck. That's.
And just to be clear, anyone can comment and get involved. It is maintainers that need to approve it. Right.
Yes, we
before
got
it
some
can be
good
merged.
feedback from people that are not contributors or maintainers or anything like that. They are maybe Flux users, or they are looking on using Flux multi-tenancy in the future. Yeah, I've seen that the pull request was approved by a member of the Microsoft Azure Arc team that integrates with Flux, and they were okay with it, and from, I think, Deutsche Telekom or something like that.
Yep. There are a couple of, I see Paolo made a comment suggesting an alternative. Is that alternative mentioned in the RFC itself that might be worth absorbing and responding to?
Yes, it's the second alternative, using Kubernetes RBAC instead of ACLs.
Oh, okay. And what's special about the use verb? I tried to find a reference for all the verbs in RBAC and couldn't find them. So what does the use verb do? Can someone explain that?
Well, to my understanding, the only implementation that had it was PSP. So basically, you could say that a service account used a given pod security policy. Given that PSP is being deprecated, I think we might not have like a native implementation of use. But again, we would have to implement that anyway.
Okay, so there's no sort of, it's just a sort of appropriate word. There's no attached semantics other than kind of what you get from the word. Okay, I see. There's no strong precedent there.
We actually do a get, so using use
Sure.
makes no sense to me.
Yeah. Okay, so
yeah, but on that point, it's just good to understand that would be a different level. So for example, the controller does a get, but you're actually saying that a service account can use the get that the controller would do, if that makes sense. But again, it depends. With the impersonation, it would just be a get. Again, depends how we want to abstract that relationship overall. But my comments were mostly around having a single source of truth rather than anything else. How we implemented it, it doesn't matter. If we don't have a single source of truth, we will probably, well, it would be good for users to have an easy way to understand the actual effective permissions, just to block for any sort of like lateral movement or privilege escalation inside of a cluster deployment.
yeah, I think that was a similar point was brought up by Jonathan from Microsoft, which is because it is not a sort of core Kubernetes doesn't understand how it works. So none of the tooling will understand the links, what's allowed and what's not. And I think Paolo suggested that therefore the sort of best you can do is to build that into Flux command line tooling, the ability to get it to tell you who's allowed to use what. Is that that's a fair summary, Paolo?
Yes, pretty much.
Of that part of your suggestion, at least, yeah.
Is there such a tool for Kubernetes network policies?
For network policies, but it's different, right? Because network policies is the single source of truth. You don't have two things to define network policies. You have one thing. And on this case, on access, we would have two things. We have the RBAC, which is built in, and on top of that, we will have the ACLs we define. So potentially a user that doesn't have the RBAC.
No. It has nothing to do with RBAC.
Well, so this sidesteps RBAC. Is that what you're saying? It ignores RBAC? You don't have to have access via RBAC?
It's like network policies, has nothing to do with RBAC. That's
But
what's
that's
proposed.
exactly the point, right? So, for example, imagine a service account that doesn't have any RBAC allowing it to have access to a given Flux resource. By leverage the ACLs, potentially it would gain access to that. So the key thing that I'm saying is that this could be classified as a privilege escalation, like, because again, if on RBAC you don't give that privilege, but then beyond leveraging one of our components, I have access to something that I shouldn't have, that might be a problem. I can work out an example and link into that, so it's easier to understand.
So we are using the controller service account to resolve the ACLs, right? And the controller service account is cluster admin. It has nothing to do with impersonation. That's what's proposed here. If you go and change how Flux is installed and you don't use our tooling and you do your own RBAC and so on, then of course you'll end up with two authorization levels. It's not enough to add ACLs. You also need for every matching label, for any matching namespace based on the label condition in the ACL, you also need to create role bindings to the controller's pod. But this RFC takes into account that you are using a standard Flux installation and you don't do your own stuff. If you do your own stuff, yes, of course, everything is subject to RBAC and you can do whatever. This is like network policies is also enforced on the client side, not on the server side. Anyway, we talked about this way too many times. I don't want to rediscuss it.
So as per the advice that the auditors gave, I think perhaps this is something we should try and engage with the SIG security or tag security. Because it fundamentally alters the I don't know what the term of art is here, but it fundamentally alters the security properties of how Flux operates by stepping outside RBAC. So is there any way we can, I don't know what the process is for trying to get the attention of tag security in Kubernetes, CNCF, whichever is the venue. Do you know, Paolo?
For an actual assessment like that, I'm not really sure what the process is. I can try to engage with them and see. In terms of the other logics or logistics, I don't remember the name of them, are we completely done with them? We can't go back to them and ask about this.
The auditors, we could, and they might be kind enough to respond, but they were sponsored to do a kind of fixed contract. So I would imagine they'd like to be paid.
All right, well,
which may be possible as well. I mean, the where we are now is much better than where we were, in that we have written things out much more precisely. So the response we got before, if you remember, was we can't really assess this because there are too many sort of dangling references and so on. Whereas with the RFCs, I think there is a much better possibility that someone would be able to assess it on its own and be able to give an answer.
Okay, so if we plan to pause this due to the issues raised by Paulo, then I think we should let the people that are integrating with Flux know that this will be delayed.
Well, I'm not suggesting we pause it due to what Paolo said. I'm suggesting we run it past security experts as suggested by the auditors.
Yeah, that could take months, right? And this is linked to GA, this is linked to multi-tenancy, this is linked to everything. So we should be transparent and tell people, hey, expect this, I don't know, in the summer or something like that, because reaching out to a tag that will for sure take months. They have many more things to do than Flux in Kubernetes itself and so on. And there is no guarantee we can respect any deadlines around multi-tenancy or GA, right? So we should let all the parties know we are actually pausing this and we defer our responsibility to some other people which are in Kubernetes SIG-tag, which are not part of Flux or our.
Yeah, well, that was the advice.
Yeah, okay. It's just, we should let people know that we are following that advice and pausing this.
Yep, if we do that. Yeah, I don't know if there's a decision process for deciding whether to do that, but that certainly was the advice given, is that any kind of security designs should be subjected to scrutiny. I think that might be something we have to sit and think about until next time. Okay, let me check if there's anything more on the agenda since I last looked.
For just 5 minutes, I would like to tell people about something new. We're introducing a new event recorder, which is not being used in any of the controllers right now. It's in the package repository. All the refactored controllers, they are using an old version of that. The new version is not being used anywhere except source controller right now. So the new event recorder is based on upstream Kubernetes event recorder interface. We have modified it to record an event to Kubernetes as well as notification controller, and added some capabilities to log the events when you increase the debug level. So we are trying to unify or reduce the point at which we make decisions, like when do we log an event? And if we log an event for certain things, maybe that's lost. Like we need to capture the event as well as the logs. So when you increase your log level to debug, the event recorder will log that event as well. So you'd be able to see it in logs. So you'll not miss something if you're not recording or collecting events of your cluster.
I like that idea.
Does that make sense? Right. So that's being used in source controller right now, and all the other controllers that have been rewritten, they will be updated to use this new event recorder.
Cool. Is that going to appear in the documentation you're writing?
It will be part of that. It's
awesome.
The change is part of the documentation, right?
Yeah. Cool. All right. So if there, thanks for that, Sonny. So if there are no other things, then we can all go get some lunch or make a cup of tea or whatever. Give it a few seconds just for people to speak up. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Cheerio. Bye-bye.